Would you like to see the alignments and the aspects we're talking about this week? Well, check out the weekly overview on the funastrology.com YouTube channel. A picture really is worth 1,000 words. TGI Friday, everybody. Thomas Miller on the Fun Astrology Podcast on September 6th already. Yay, hey. And hope you have a good weekend planned. You know, obviously we're coming off of that holiday weekend, but kids are back in school. We're getting settled into things. And I'm sorry for those of you south of the equator, but this is kind of what's going on up here, at least in our neck of the woods. I know you south of the equator are coming out of winter, looking forward to summer. All right, we set up the weekend yesterday. Tomorrow has one other element that we mentioned but didn't go into, and that is this phenomenon called the moon wobble. So I thought we would talk about it again. I'm just really interested in it. I know Robert Glasscock, he just poo-poos it. But I think there's something that is at least worth observing, and if you are practicing astrology or trying to understand astrology, I think this is one of those things that you just tuck under the brim of your hat and you are aware of. And here's the premise. I'm going to give you a couple of resources right off the bat, so you might want to pause this, get something to capture this with, and then you could do some deep diving if you're more interested. There is a book that is written by Naomi Bennett, and it's co-authored by Payne Tobey. And let me spell that. It's Carl with a C, C-A-R-L, Payne Tobey. The name of this book is Moon Wobbles and Eclipses in Astrology, Looking at the Moon. I'm not going to go into further description here. I'm just wanting to give you these resources for you to check out if you're interested. The other one is going to be a little harder to read, but it is called The Astrology of Inner Space. And in that book, now it's used, it's out of print, been out of print for quite a while, but there are some used copies out there. And the chapter that's entitled Parallel Line Theory is where Payne Tobey explains this concept of disruption around the sun encountering the nodes of the moon. So that's the Astrology of Inner Space, I-N-N-E-R space, written by Payne Tobey. Now, he did most of his work in the 1930s and 40s, and as I understand or as I have read, he was a statistician. And he was trying to find a relationship between insurance claims, or the increase of insurance claims, specifically fire claims, and astrological cycles. So he was looking for a pattern. His first exploration was around what you might think he could start looking at was eclipses. But after studying that for years, he abandoned that because there was no statistical correlation that he could find. But he did observe that conjunctions and squares between the sun and the nodes of the moon were statistically significant. Here's what he wrote. When the sun is conjunct or square the lunar nodes, there is human instability. People are excitable. They are more easily confused. Their reactions are emotional rather than intellectual. Something must be done about something. Then a friend of Tobey's who founded this organization called the Prosperous, and that's Prosperos, and there's actually an article from their website, The Prosperous, spelled that way, .org, on the moon wobble. So supposedly the person who founded that organization was a friend of Tobey's and was the one who dubbed the term moon wobble. The observation was that the moon doesn't do anything. We've said that all along. It's people who get wobbly. The general rule, they said, was that any decision made during a moon wobble cycle, and we'll talk about that here in a second, would have to be revisited. Then, as people started to observe this more closely, here's a list of some things that happened during moon wobbles. Go back to 1986. The Challenger space shuttle explosion happened during a moon wobble. And then on the next one, which these are 86 and a half days apart each, the Chernobyl nuclear reaction happened. Some of you may remember in 1987 in the Philippines, there was a ferry that had 3,000 people on board hit a tanker. That was also under a moon wobble. In 1989, in the Ural Mountains of Russia, there was a natural gas pipeline explosion that killed 645 people. Some of the other notables are the USS Cole attack, the Oklahoma City bombing, and 9/11. So the way the moon wobble is calculated is you find the next conjunction or square between the sun and the nodes of the moon. In this case, for us here in September, it is going to be a conjunction between the sun and the south node, which happens early in the morning on September 29th. Then it has a window of orb. Some people say 14 days, some people say 21 days. And then it has a waxing phase of typically 7 days. So from September 29th, you can walk back 14 or 21 days, and then you can go past the 29th, 7 days. That's the window of this phenomenon. And by the way, back in October of last year, the Hamas attack that triggered this situation in the Middle East happened just before that 21-day period. So this is something that I think is worth noting, definitely. And as I've mentioned before, Payne Tobey was best friends with a guy by the name of Grant Louie, who was the mentor of Linda Goodman directly in New York City. And Linda Goodman, of course, mentored Robert Glasscock, and he mentors us. So we're not that far away from the guy that statistically originated this, looking for patterns in insurance claims. Okay, so what? What do we do with this? Well, the same thing as all these other things. Mercury retrograde, Uranus retrograde, Saturn retrograde, Pluto entering Capricorn. I mean, all of these things that are going on right now. We live our highest timeline. We set our own path. We set our own course, and we realize what's the weather. Would you step out when it's 5 below zero Fahrenheit without a coat for an extended period of time? Probably not the smartest thing to do. You're aware of your surroundings, so you dress appropriately. Same thing here. We're aware of our surroundings right now in the sky, and we set our intentions appropriately. We set our own course and our own path to be able to thrive and flourish in these conditions. Sometimes it's mash the gas, go, and sometimes it's tap the brakes or at least be cautious. You know what they say about driving on New Year's Eve, right? It's amateur night. If you're going to be out, best be careful. Same thing here. So we just set our intentions around it. There are several points that people have made about what to do and not do during this time, and those are basically individual. But the one thing that I think makes the most sense is it's possible that things don't go as planned during a moon wobble, so plan to be flexible. Some say don't get married, some say don't make major purchases. I mean, you can take this as far as you want, and some people follow that even during Mercury retrograde, and many don't, and they are just fine. And I think that's the difference. It's the power of intention. So set powerful intentions and move on with our lives, knowing that maybe you need a coat out for this little stretch here of the next couple of weeks. Might want to bundle up. All right, there you go. Sets you up for the weekend, and that begins early Sunday morning if you want to, mark the calendar on that one. Have a great one. I'll see you for Merriman tomorrow and then back for regular scheduled programming next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Sending love.